Hello, hello. Hi. Hi. Welcome to We on the 8th. My name is Grace Sue. I'm an actress, video editor. Aw, you don't have to do that. Actress, video editor, and your moderator for tonight. I see some new faces here. It's been a hot minute that I've been here, so I think we need a refresher of what We on the 8th is. So for those who don't know, tonight we have a very cool guest speaker. Her name is Olivia Ku. She's, yay! Yes, these must be her friends. Yes, yes. I love that we have an intimate group because we're going to be talking about intimacy, as y'all know. And she's going to be sharing her process from pre-production through post-production as an intimacy coordinator. So, without further ado, please, if you would join me on the stage. Do you have a preference for which side? Yeah. So I know you wanted to start with a self-care exercise.
We're going to start with the self-care exercise. I know it's like a Monday, and it's really hot outside, and so I'm sure everyone kind of had to deal with some traffic, maybe some like crazy people on the street, I don't know. So we're just going to do a quick like stretch, breathing, whatever you need. Do like a couple deep breaths, like stretch it out, wiggle your toes. Also, if at any point you need to like go outside, take a call, or you need to use the restroom, feel free to do that. Like this is your space also, like whatever it is that you need to like take care of yourselves. So I'm going to do like a quick breathing with y'all. It's an offering, so if you don't feel like doing it, you can totally just chill in your chair. So it's going to be 3 count breaths in and then 3 out, and then we'll do it 3 times. So deep breath in, 1, 2, 3, and then out, 1, 2, 3. Deep breath in, 1, 2, 3. Deep breath out, 1, 2, 3. Last one, deep inhale, 1, 2, 3, and then let it all go. 1, 2, 3. And then if you need to stretch it out or like move your body, feel free to do that. That's something I also offer my actors whenever they're doing like intense scenes and intimacy, that sort of thing. There can be a lot of, nerves or like they might feel awkward or something, and that helps like kind of ground you into the space. So thank you for joining me on that.
Yay, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. I got to remember to use the mic. So we have a lot to talk about tonight. But before we get into it, why don't you share a little bit about who you are and how you came to be an intimacy coordinator?
Okay, I will. So I'm Olivia Ku. I've been doing intimacy coordinating, like I think full time starting probably January of this year. Prior to that, I've worked on a few projects. So overall, I would say doing it like maybe a year and a half, but the bulk of it has been like this year, as a lot of different shows and producers have brought me on. This year, I think I'm on project number 33. So but the thing is like as an IC, you don't get the full run of any show or any movie. You're just brought on for the scenes that have intimacy. So if the crew is there for like months, I'm maybe there like 5 days, right? 10 days, depending on how much intimacy there is. My background is in survivor advocacy, so years of doing like consent-based work with survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault. Also content warning, if anything comes up and you feel like a little charge in your body or anything like that, feel free to step out, do some breathing, all of that, whatever it is that you need. And then prior to that, I had like a whole spiel doing like health and wellness influencing stuff. And prior to that, I was an actress, and I was in a few situations that weren't the most comfortable for me as like a young woman. Like I had one experience where I think I was 19 at the time, and it was my first thing that I had ever booked. And then I got to set, and then they had a man who was like 45 who was effectively supposed to be like a drug lord in this like show that we were doing. And the director was like, "Can one of you make out with him?" And I was just like a deer in headlights. So I didn't end up being the one that had to do it, but that really also just, I recall that experience, and I think about that experience too when I go on set and I work with actors. I love working with first-time actors that are first time to intimacy, like actors who've never done it before, or also like young actors, minors, that sort of thing, just because I really love informing them on like, these are your boundaries, people have to respect them. So I love that sort of thing. So that's kind of my background on how I became an intimacy coordinator.
Awesome. I know you had a video you wanted to share. Should we look at that now?
So we're gonna play a video, and it's PG-13. There's no sound. One of the things that I wanted to kind of like show people is that you can really tell stories through physicality. And I think one thing that a lot of people may not know is that intimacy coordinators, we're also creatives, we're also choreographers. And the scene that we're gonna watch is with two actors. I have their permission to show it. It's a BTS video. There's gonna be no sound, but you'll just watch the choreography and enjoy it. So that was Eric Gilmet and Christine Marie Evans. I got to work with them on that scene, and the director was very much like, Olivia, just do it. And so that was like fully choreographed, and we built containers, meaning that they told each other like what their boundaries were, what works for their bodies, what doesn't, and then we played within that space so that they're still able to discover like different moments if they felt like called to discover them. Some actors prefer not to do that. They want everything specifically choreographed. This one is kind of like a mix of both. And I'm just curious from the audience what you all noticed about that scene. Anybody? Don't be shy. Yeah, go ahead.
So notice it was on a vertical
Mm-hmm.
format, right? And then Sina's suggestion was more about the reaction. So kind of like hiding the guy's face behind what was tension building, and as the tension builds of his and getting in the sensitive area, pause there. It's like the climax of the movie.
Yeah, definitely. I saw another hand over here. Yeah.
I like the way they kind of share power, like one him kind of coming in, but then her like is pushing and pulling at the same time, and then at the end, like her showing that she really liked it.
Yeah. The reason I showed this one is because it's such a good example of what intimacy coordinators can help choreograph, because there's so much physical storytelling, and a lot of our work is in the physical storytelling of the intimacy, because you can see that there is tension between these two. They have some type of relationship. Like, you can see all of those moments just through the physicality, and that is, I think, one of at least my favorite parts of the job is that creative aspect of the job. There's several other like aspects to the job, of course, but I think that's something that's not always talked about or maybe not always considered. And so for directors and like filmmakers and all of that, like this is something that we are trained in and that we like love to help with. Sometimes directors love to do like all the choreography and all the moments, and I'm just there to like technically adjust. So the job is also kind of flexible in the sense that some projects you'll be doing a lot of the choreography, some you'll be doing less, sometimes it's a mix. It kind of just like changes depending on the people that you're working with. Yeah.
Very cool. You know, I actually found a quote from
Oh.
online
Okay.
that you said about.
Okay.
I always and I thought it was very insightful. You said, intimacy professionals play a pivotal role in all forms of art, serving as architects of safe and empowering spaces, allowing artistic expressions to flourish with dignity, respect, and unyielding courage. Yeah, so I guess we're gonna talk about what intimacy is and what you do, what your role is, beginning with pre-production,
Yeah,
right?
pre-production. So I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that people think that if we just bring on an intimacy coordinator for the scene, like that's great. And I tell them we're not COVID compliance. Like we need prep. The majority of our work happens during prep. So hire an intimacy coordinator as early on as you possibly can, because we can assist with casting notices. That's a very important aspect that sometimes I feel like is missed, because casting directors may not necessarily know the verbiage of what time of intimacy is being filmed. I know earlier I chatted with a few of you about different casting notices, and sometimes they'll just write simulated sex, but there can be all different types of that. Like, what does that mean? And it's important to be specific, because a non-consensual simulated sex scene is very different than a consensual one. And some actors may be willing to perform certain types of intimacy, but not other types. So if you can inform them as early as possible, you'll get a better pool of people who are auditioning, because they already want to do that type of work. It's a lot harder when you cast somebody and then they're like, actually, I don't want to do X, Y, and Z and all of this. And then production has to like make a decision on whether or not they want to keep that actor, work with those boundaries, or if they want to recast. So I just always say, if possible, bring us on early, so that we can really help facilitate what goes into those casting notices, so that we're able to be like, hey, like, let's get really specific. And so whoever auditions for this isn't going to waste your time or waste their own time. So that's like part of pre-production. Also, we oversee nudity writers. So nudity writers right now under SAG, you have 48 hours before a scene is filmed to have actors sign the nudity writers. And whatever goes in the nudity writer typically should be what happens on set. Sometimes there's like negotiations and that sort of thing, but for the most part, that's what's set in stone. Originally, and depending on region, usually lawyers are the ones writing it, or their agents, or like the production team, like somebody from that team, because it's a contract between production and the actor. ICs oversee it. I think maybe within this last year, we stopped being the ones that write them, but it's also regional dependent. So in other countries, other areas, it could be different, but here in LA, for the most part, we're not the ones writing the nudity writers, but we will oversee it. So if I get brought on into a production, then I ask for like, hey, like, can I see the nudity writer? What's going in it? Like, what are these actors going to be performing? And then I'll go over that with the actors. And then on the day that we're filming the scene, we'll go over that as well. If there's any kind of like discrepancies, if the director's like, oh, I want to shoot X, Y, and Z, but we agreed to A, B, and C in the nudity writer, then I'm the one that's usually like, okay, so the nudity writer says we're going to shoot A, B, and C. If that's something that you want to have a conversation with them about, then we need to like halt production and like have a conversation. So that's also a big part of pre-production. Also, that is where depending on the production, big studio productions, you may never talk to the director. Maybe a PA is calling you, maybe a first AD, maybe a second, but basically the more famous somebody is, the more people there are in between them. And so ideally, in the perfect scenario, you would get to talk to the director directly and get their vision for the intimacy scenes. And when you get their vision for it, then you kind of know like what they're expecting of the actors, what they think the actors may be wearing, what they're doing, what the choreography looks like. We talk about like all those details. And after I have that meeting, I'll go and talk to the actors individually, depending on, again, how famous they are and how many people are in between, and relay those notes and then talk through what type of boundaries they have, what they're willing to show on camera, what they're not willing to show, like what could help like facilitate certain types of choreography, if they prefer to build a container and then improvise with their scene partner within the container. Or I've had some actors tell me like, I don't want to do any of that. I just want you to choreograph exactly what we're going to be doing in the rehearsal, and I just want to film that. Usually that typically happens on like scenes where we're working on like non-consensual content, and it makes more sense. I'm also more on the side of if we're filming something that's non-consensual, we're just going to do pretty much what we've discussed in rehearsal, and if we're going to add anything else, we need to have like, it doesn't have to be a long conversation, but we need to at least be like, okay, if we're going to adjust this, like let's make sure everyone is in agreement to the adjustment before we do another take. So that's kind of like how that approach works with pre-production and talking to actors. Sometimes, most of the time, I also have to check with costumes. So depending on what the actors are wearing, and I think a lot of costume professionals have been doing this for a very long time. So they're, well versed in like modesty garments, barriers, all the things, but just in case, I also have that in my kit, and just so I can confirm with them and get on the same page and make sure they have like robes and slippers and all the things that they're gonna need for the intimacy scenes. So that's like pre-production. Trying to think if there's anything else that I forgot.
Rehearsals?
Yes, rehearsals. So rehearsals either happen during pre-production, or sometimes if they don't have time, it'll happen the day of. And I have like mixed feelings about it, because usually if it happens before we get to set, it always changes. So it's like we still have to have another rehearsal because the space is different. The movements are going to be different. The clothing is different. Their costumes are not going to be what they're usually wearing during the rehearsal. It's kind of rare. They're usually just coming in on their clothes and like we're working through the rehearsal. Rehearsals are also closed set. So depending on the set, it's usually me and then the director, the actors, sometimes the DP, sometimes the first AD, sometimes a PA. It just really kind of depends on each production. But for the most part, like minimal amount of people, because the choreography is not set yet. So when we're setting the choreography, not everybody needs to watch it because we don't know exactly what we're doing yet. So that's kind of all like pre-production work.
Yes, and I also just wanted to let you guys know, because we have such an intimate group, and Olivia's open to this, if anyone has a pressing question that's relevant to what she's speaking on, feel free to raise your hand, ask the question. We want it to be more like a conversation. So
Yeah.
if anyone has a question about what she's just shared, anyone? Or we'll keep moving on to production.
Yeah. So one thing also in pre-production that I didn't mention is I also do a breakdown. So I'll go in and break down the whole script myself, because sometimes they don't, like productions and like casting or whoever is doing the intimacy breakdown may not consider something intimacy that actually is intimacy. So an example of this is when we have, let's say, a 7-year-old who has a parent in a show and they have to do a bathtub scene, or they have to like have a forehead kiss or a hug. Like those are all moments of intimacy. Also, if you're wearing like traditional garbs and you have to undress the traditional garb, like yes, you're not technically getting fully naked, but that could be a very sensitive topic for a lot of people. So that's something to consider. Or also just scenes where there's non-consensual actions happening, but maybe it's not simulated sex. You can also bring an intimacy coordinator for that. So we're just there for like a lot of different areas that other people may not always consider as intimacy. And then that breakdown also, I can like let the director know like, hey, I might be helpful in X, Y, Z scenes that like you guys haven't like noted. Would you like my help there? So that happens sometimes as well.
Do you actually like read the whole script and like mark up like all the moments? Okay.
Yeah, I do read the whole, yes, go ahead.
What happens when it's like really last minute and they only send you the scene because of people like get
How do you handle it when you're like brought on last minute, you're working the next day, and they only send you the scene?
That does happen sometimes. And I ask for the script. If they send it, great. If I have time to read the whole thing, I'll try to do it. But if it's just like, we only want you for these 2 scenes, this is all we're sending you because we are under all these NDAs and we don't want to send you anything else, then at least they have me for that, right?
Make it
Yeah.
work.
Yeah. Yeah, any other questions? Okay, should we keep trekking along?
Yeah. What happens on set?
Oh, what happens on set? Okay, so what I was saying earlier, sometimes rehearsals literally happen right before we get into the scene. Usually, depending on, so this year I've worked on over 30 productions, so a lot of the actors I've worked with multiple times and a lot of directors I've worked with multiple times, and they don't need as much of like a private conversation before we do the scene because they're so seasoned, they've done a lot of intimacy. So I like to kind of adjust my work to what the person needs. And I think that's an aspect that ICs really need to tune into, because I think sometimes you may offer something and you're like, this is a great thing, but that person may not want it, right? And being like, okay, I need to be self-aware enough to be like, they don't want it. I can't force that on them because that's not consensual, right? And so depending on the actors, if they do want to have a private conversation, I'll take them aside and be like, okay, so all this stuff we talked about during prep, like how's it feeling for you today? Because consent is ongoing. So maybe there are like, yeah, cool, touch my shoulder in prep, but then now they're like, nah, don't touch my shoulder. So we constantly have these kind of consent check-ins, and I always let the actors know, like, check in with each other. Like, before you do any physical, like, touch to someone, just be like, hey, is it cool if I do this movement? Does this work for you? Just a check-in. And usually actors, they'll have built some rapport if they've already been, like, working on scenes together. Some actors are super comfortable, so my job is, like, I guess, just kind of being there. And then sometimes I'm a lot more hands-on, just depending on like what they need. During the private conversations that we have, we're usually talking about boundaries. We're usually talking about like what they need for the scene, like what they're willing, what's on the table, what's not on the table, that sort of thing. Just kind of like reiterating the stuff during prep and if anything has changed. Once in a blue moon, we'll have where we have to facilitate a conversation with like producers and directors just to get back on the same page, so that there are just certain things maybe an actor just doesn't want to do that day. And then so I'll facilitate a conversation. One thing I will say is I'm not there to convince anyone to do anything. Sometimes producers think that I'm there to convince actors to like do X, Y, and Z, like make it sound nice and like, you know, and I'm like, that's not my job. And I'm also not a decision maker. I don't get to decide that, you know, whether or not an actor does something or doesn't do something, or whether we shoot a scene or not. That's totally above our pay grade. Like producers decide all that. I can only just facilitate those conversations and like make sure everybody is heard, try to come to some kind of mutual understanding, try to work out, like problem solve different ideas. If a certain like choreography isn't working for the actor, I'll give other options if it's possible. So that's kind of where like my job lands. And then when we go to shoot the scene, usually I prefer to kind of see the scene, maybe the first take, just watching it, obviously closed set, so just whoever needs to be in the room working, monitors off, depending on the type of intimacy and the comfort levels of the actors. I've had a lot of actors now that don't need closed sets for kissing scenes because they're like, it's just a kiss. We don't need to do the whole spiel. Always offer it and ask them like what they would want, because we're there to advocate for them, not there to assume what it is that they need. At least that's what I've learned over the last year or so, is like, I think when we go through training, there's all of these things. They're like, you need to do X, Y, Z, and blah, 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 and all of this. And yes, those are so important to have all those tools. I also think it's really important to ask your actors, ask your director, like what it is that they need for that scene. Because some actors are like, no, let's just keep moving. Let's just keep moving. It's just a kissing scene. It's like 3-second kissing scene. We don't need to like close down the whole set for this. So that's dependent. If it's anything more than kissing, like if anyone's taking a shirt off or anything like that, I just close the set. Actors for the most part are just so much more comfortable like with the set closed down with minimal people. And I feel like crews now really respect that. They understand that, which is nice. So I feel like there's a lot of progress being made. And then after the first take, maybe I'll go probably sit and watch behind camera and like see like how things are going, be at Video Village. And then if there's any, depending on the director, if there's technical adjustments that need to be made, sometimes it's just like they're kissing and the hair is blocking everything and we just see hair. And so I'll just, depending if the director wants me to tell the actors or if they want to tell the actors, it's very much a feel it out and like see what is needed for the scene and for the people there. So the scene that we just watched, the director was very much like, I don't know, go for it. Like, and he's wonderful. Like this was one of the shows that I worked on where we had minors, and on one of the days they didn't have me come in. There was a hand-holding moment with a mother and a minor, and the minor didn't want to do it, and they were like, "That's cool, you don't have to." And I remember coming in the next day and them telling me like just so happy. They're like, "Olivia, like we didn't make the kid hold the hand," and I was like, "That's amazing." So I think also like just really setting the culture on set, like letting the whole crew know like there's safe words. Like I use the word button a lot, throwing up a peace sign for a nonverbal cue, like just offering things and like letting everyone know like, hey, like we're shooting these things, like let's try to make it as great of an experience for everyone as possible. And then usually after we do a few takes of it, like there might be some adjustments, maybe the director has some notes, or like I can offer some choreography adjustments, like that sort of thing. And then once the scene is done, depending on whether the actors need it or not, I'll do like a breathing exercise with them. And these are all offerings, so I kind of, in prep, ask them like, you know, like what do you need for this? I check if they have allergies. I do a wellness check-in if they need anything, just in general so that I know what to prepare for. And I think that is one thing where I'm like, if you take anything away from tonight is that ICs need prep. Prep is vital. Prep is everything. Like give us prep, because that we're planning and solving all the things ahead of time, because on the day, it's gonna cost so much more for 15 minutes of conversation, and sometimes it goes up to an hour where the whole crew is just sitting there and the director, producers, actors, and me are having a conversation. That is really expensive. And just have the IC give them a day rate for their prep or however many hours it takes them to prep the scene, and just let them handle that. So on the day, we don't have to run into a lot of those conversations. I will say it doesn't happen very often because most productions now understand that they need to give ICs prep. But that is something that I feel like is worth like mentioning and educating people on, because that's something that they don't really think about. They think a lot of our job is to show up on the set and make sure that like, oh yeah, they're just there. They're just gonna stand there and make sure that the intimacy is consensual. And it's like, I'm not COVID compliance. I'm not HR. Like that's not my job. My job is to make sure that your production can go as smoothly as possible if I prepare everybody for it. So yeah.
Oh, wow. How much prep time do you usually need?
It depends. So I will say, if it's a kissing scene, not that much. Like if it's just like, oh, two people making out against a wall, right? I probably will try to have a conversation with the director if they have anything specific that they want for that scene, what they want the actors wearing, what they want the actors doing, what type of like kissing is it, what's the relationship, what's the power dynamic. These are all questions that I ask directors. And then I'll also call the actors and like have a conversation with them. So maybe like half a day to do that. But this is not including like all the breakdowns and script reading and all of that also goes into it. But those, like with kissing, doesn't take a lot. I would say non-consensual scenes take a lot of time. And the reason I say that is because you have to be very sensitive to the material and the people working on the scenes, and you have to get very specific with what they're willing to portray, what they're not willing to portray, what type of choreography they're comfortable with, what they're not. Also to get on the same page with everybody about what we're actually going to be filming. I think a good example of this is the movie that just came out with Justin Baldoni and Blake Lively. It Ends With Us. I hope, yes, It Ends With Us. And I can tell from just my job, the way that Justin Baldoni directed it, that he was not glamorizing any of those really difficult moments. And you weren't seeing a lot. And that is a choice that a director has to make. And that is also something that as an intimacy coordinator that you can inform them on. So having a background in consent work, I'm like, hey, so if we do this, it's going to be glamorizing X, Y, and Z. I don't get to make the decision, but I can inform them on like what's being shown. And I think that there's a very important distinction when it comes to that sometimes. A lot of shows now, I don't know why they do this, but someone's always drunk. Like they're doing intimacy and either they're both drunk or someone is drunk. And so I'm like, okay, like there's a very fine line because legally if you're drunk, people can't consent. So how are we gonna physically tell this story so it's very clear that both parties are consenting while they're still drunk? Because sometimes directors are like, well, it's fine because they're both excited to do it. I'm like, yeah, but you have her crying in the next scene. That's not fine. Like, which story are we telling? And so a lot of it is like informing them on like what consent actually looks like and how people in real life may respond. A lot of educating them on like that sort of thing, informing them. I have had directors who already know this and it's wonderful. And they're like, I don't want to glamorize anything. I don't want to show X, Y, and Z. I want to be like very specific with what we're shooting. So I love that as well. So I've kind of experienced like a wide variety of it. I will say I don't experience a lot of pushback, which is nice. I think a lot of times not a lot of times, but like if productions haven't worked with an intimacy coordinator before and I'm the first one, everyone kind of seems like on edge when I show up to work. Like everyone's just like, oh my God, what's happening? I can't touch anyone. And I'm like, I'm not HR. Like if you're someone and you've been working with this actress for like 10 weeks before I come in to work on this one intimacy scene and you give them a hug, I'm not gonna be like, why are you hugging that person? Like that's, I'm like, I'm sure you have a friendly relationship. Like I'm not gonna assume anything unless someone tells me something. So, I mean, I will read body language because sometimes I have actresses that are like, it's fine, really, it's fine, I'll do it. And I'm like, that's, okay, let me pull you, let's have a conversation, like what's going on? So I think it's also important to like have soft skills and be emotionally intelligent and aware of how people are responding in those moments because there's a lot of pressure. There's so many power dynamics on set. And so that's something that's really important too as an aspect of my job. Yeah.
Are there ever any situations where something is not choreographed and then there's like parameters where it's like, okay, these actors are basically willing to do anything, so go at it?
Yes. So it's very dependent on like what the actors, how they feel the most comfortable performing the intimacy scenes. There are parameters set by the union, so you can't actually perform real sex acts. There needs to be a barrier if there's simulated sex so that there's no fluid exchange. So if you go on the SAG website and you like type in intimacy coordinating, they have a whole PDF on like what the union has decided is appropriate and not, and there's no sex acts, period. So within that scope and whatever the actors are comfortable with, we work around that. So some actors are like, oh, I feel like if we choreograph everything to the T, it feels like I'm just a robot and I'm not actually like being an actor. And that's totally fine. We just talk about very specifically like what areas work for you, what positions work for you, what shapes work for you. And then we work through that, and then they have the ability to play within that space. I think a lot of my job, I feel like, is letting actors freely play and enjoy their time on set. Like, I want them to be able to have fun and feel like they're in a comfortable and safe space that they can do the best job as an actor. Like, whatever that looks like for them. So it's like adjusting, right? Some actors are like, I'm super duper comfortable if you just tell me exactly where to place my hands on my scene partner's body. Like, I don't want to improvise anything. And then some actors are like, I really want to improvise stuff. Can we build a container of what type of improvisation we can do? So that's kind of how that works.
You mentioned SAG guidelines a lot. And I know you also mentioned non-union. Is there a difference on those projects?
Yes. So I feel like for me, I just, whether it's union or non-union, always just go by the guidelines. I just feel like it's the best thing to do, and I find that most non-union productions will just go with it because that's like the standard protocol and best practice. So that's usually what I do. I haven't experienced anything where people have pushed back on like that sort of thing. Yeah.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, thankfully.
I did read that there has been a little pushback on ICs. Like, there are certain folks who are opposed to it. I guess. I don't know if you've experienced any of that.
My question is why? I'm like, I mean, right. Also, if an actor doesn't want to work with me, I'm totally cool with that too. Because I feel like one of the things I learned in my training is you're serving the most vulnerable person in the room, right? So if one actor is like, not into the IC thing, but the other one wants you there, then you're there for that person. It can also be like that the director wants you there. It could also just be like protection for production, because they're like, no, we just need to have one. So whatever that scope looks like, and a lot of it, as I said, it varies. Yeah.
Talking about varying.
Oh, yeah.
Hello.
Hi.
Do you want to talk a little bit about what the environment was like pre-ICs and why it became so important to have ICs on set? The free-for-all, what happened, the movement, and all of the things that happened on set, which really turned out to be a lot of illegal acts and a lot of betrayals, and the things that we're watching right now from years prior. You're watching a lot of non-consensual scene practices. So if you want to, talk about that a little bit, I think that people would want to hear.
Yeah, I think prior to like the last few years, I think like there was not really a specific role that was working as an intimacy coordinator. And I think that caused a lot of harm in the industry after like the Me Too movement came out, so many different people have had these really tough experiences that were just like life-changing. And I think because there's so many power dynamics that tend to happen on set, and also just in general with like filmmaking, productions, producers, distributors, like there's just like all of this power. And so part of our job and part of my training was also to understand that like when you do get to set, when you are working with different people, there are going to be different power dynamics at play, and navigating those and making sure the people who are the most vulnerable in those rooms are heard, their boundaries are respected. And so I think it's great that this role is something, I feel like it's becoming pretty normal to have an intimacy coordinator. As of 2024, this year, SAG has said that if an actor requests an intimacy coordinator, production should do their best to provide one. So I'm like, there's a lot of us, So I'm not sure, like, I don't know, do you need like underwater basket weaving and scuba gear? I don't know. I feel like maybe there's an IC that also does that. But in general now, I think it's pretty standard practice. Deadpool, the movie, also gave us a shout out, which was really cool. I was like in the theater not expecting that, and I was like, Ryan Reynolds just gave me a shout out.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was such a great question, and probably should have opened with that actually. Yeah, the necessity for ICs. Yeah, I mean, HBO kind of led the way, right?
Mhm.
With all that, what was that, late 2018 or something? And then I guess all the other networks, cable channels started following suit. And
they make the scenes better, you know? Like the scenes just get so dynamically better because the actors feel more comfortable to freely perform. And then we also, like, from working on so many, now I think I've worked on over 100 different intimacy scenes. So there's so many things I learn every time as well, and different tools that I can bring to the set. And it's like a beautiful, magical thing when you can create like such a beautiful scene and tell stories physically, and like, it's wonderful all around.
you mentioned to me before that ICs all work differently. You guys are all different. Like some of you have different specialties. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so definitely I feel like intimacy coordinators, we all kind of have like our method to the madness. For the most part, you know, what we've talked about so far, like pre-production and being on set, like that's what it looks like, but everybody communicates differently. Everyone has different tools in their toolkit. I am a squishmallow person. So tomorrow when I go to set, we're working on some really intense scenes, and we are bringing the emotional support squishmallows to set. And that's part of my kit, but not everybody does that. And I think it's also probably just like individually, like what works for you, what you feel like you want to offer other people. Other ICs are also stunt people, and that's how they come to this work. So they're really good when there's scenes where there's both stunts and intimacy. Some ICs really like to like do different types of like rope play stuff. There's just every single genre possible, and it's just really like, I think when you're hiring an IC, definitely vet them, ask them like, you know, like what do you like to work on? Have you worked on scenes like this? What type of training do you have? Like, I think those are all really important questions. I think it's great getting referrals, but I also think it's really important to know that that person has had extensive training, that they've worked, that they're, you know, there to really like support the entire production. Because I think sometimes there is this like where, because there's not technically a one entity that's like, oh, you're an IC, right? So someone could walk off from the door and be like, hey, I'm an intimacy coordinator, I can do this. And like, that is where you kind of run into like potentially causing more harm on set. So very much like vet your intimacy coordinators. And the ones that I would say are really good will refer you to someone else if that's a scene that they don't want to work on, or that they're like, I know someone else with more expertise than me, I'm gonna send you my friend. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember you shared a story with me about like even cultural differences, like
Yeah.
how intimacy is conveyed differently by different people.
Yeah, I think that's also sometimes like important, is depending on like what story it is, it's also, you can think about like what intimacy coordinator would best serve this production for the story that we're telling. So I love to work within Community. I would have loved to work on like DD, where they did like the two kids in the playground scene. Sorry if I ruined that for anybody. But it's not too big of a spoiler. So that sort of thing where it's like cultural competency sometimes is really important, or just like the right person for that job. Yeah.
Very cool.
Also, better is better. So if you can't find that specific right person, just bring on an IC.
Yeah, I remember you shared a story about Kim's Convenience, about how like it probably could have, the story could have been told better if maybe they had someone who actually understood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you've all watched Kim's Convenience, but there was an episode where Oma and Appa had like a sexcapade like throughout the entire episode, which culturally doesn't really make sense, especially because they, in the story, also go to church every Sunday. So like, I just feel like as, I mean, it's just, yeah. Yeah, I think we know where we're going with that.
Could have been told better.
Yeah.
Anyway, did we cover everything on set?
I think so. Sometimes, I will also say, when I get to set, I'll check with the other departments just to make sure we have everything that we need for the intimacy scenes. So just check with costumes, what the costumes looking like, check with props if there's any props or anything like that we may need. Usually it's sheets and pillows and making sure that they're not see-through. Yeah, that seems to come up a lot. I'm like, is it a white sheet? Because they're wearing modesty garments under. If it's white, it's gonna be see-through. Yeah, so those types of things, little details. Yeah.
Cool. Are we ready to move to post?
Post-production. So I feel like post-production, not a lot of productions necessarily need this, but we can oversee any like reshoots, ADR, if there is any conversations to be had because something happened on set, we can definitely like facilitate those types of conversations if they need us to review footage. So let's say like there's the actors have not agreed to show any nudity, but whatever garment they were wearing, maybe there was like some movement with the garment and there was accidental nudity. So you could bring on an IC to be like, hey, like we can only use these shots, we can't use these other shots. So like that's also an aspect of the work. Also sending in a post-production report just to let production know like these are the things that happened, these are the conversations that happened, and that sort of thing. Yeah.
That's really good because I'm sure in the past, before ICs were around, I'm sure a lot of footage that people wouldn't have wanted out there got out there.
Yeah, I will also say per SAG, once it's shot, it can be used. You can't go back on it. So if there is a boundary that has changed, you need to really inform them before it gets shot. If there's accidental like nudity or something like that, which it was not meant for, that's something that wouldn't go into it. That would be something that I would really push for and be like, we can't use that because that's not in the nudity writer, it's not in the agreement, like that sort of thing. But if it's something like you do the first take and then you regret it, it's technically okay for them to use it. But I will say, like, you also can talk to the director in production, and like, depending on your relationship, they might just delete it. So, but that's something if you're an actor to just be mindful about.
I was just thinking with, I don't know if this is related, but with like AI and stuff, I wonder if that's like a conversation because like, oh, if they're not willing to do it in live, can we do it with AI? Like
that also is a legal team thing where they would have to like write in their whatever legal terms it is into their writers and be like, okay, body doubles are a thing. So they'll either use a body double. I don't know if they're doing AI for that stuff. I haven't encountered that. I'm sure that's maybe on the table for some productions. But in general, like there are guidelines to having a body double as well. That's also in the SAG guidelines. Yeah.
Okay. Wow, we covered a lot of ground.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any questions? I mean, we also have things we could talk about, like big studio projects versus independent versus.
Yeah.
You work on a lot of vertical series.
Yeah, I work on a lot of verticals. I am their in-house go-to intimacy coordinator, gratefully. I don't know how that happened. It just kind of happened. But I actually really enjoy working on them because I think it's lower stakes than big studio projects, and it tends to be a younger crew, and they're just so happy you're there. And that's really cool because I feel like that's a lot of progress in general, and given my background in survivor advocacy, I really feel like that makes a huge difference, just the way that everything is progressing and changing. With big studio projects, it tends to be very, I would say, more cookie cutter. So like everybody is so specific in their roles and what they're doing, and there's so many like different people in between other people, and so that can sometimes feel like very corporate in a way. Whereas with more like streaming and like lower budget stuff where you have more leeway, people are more like open to the work and more like wanting to have conversations with you and like understand what you do. But I will say, even on the big studio things, sometimes people like just get really nervous when I get to set. I don't know why that is. Yeah. So I think I will say also on the big studio projects, you may not have the same kind of prep because you may not ever be able to talk to the director directly. Same thing with like A-list actors. You may never be able to like, because they're not going to give you their personal phone call. They might set up like a meeting or something, or they'll like maybe have their manager or someone call you on their way to set, something like that. So it's kind of like you just have to gear your work toward whatever is happening on that production, and they're always different. Every production is different. They're gonna need different things. Every actor is different. Every person is different. So that's kind of like what I also hope people take away, is that it's a very, it depends on what is needed for the moment. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I recently been watching a lot of vertical series for research, and they're very spicy. So
They are
I can
very
see
spicy.
I can see why they need ICs.
Yeah, I think that's like one of their selling points is, and it's super fun to work with. The actors on it are like really great to work with, and it's nice to be able to work with the same people because you really get to know what their boundaries are, what works for them, what doesn't work for them, so that the workflow also becomes so streamlined, and that's been also really great. And I don't know, I think I'm a Virgo. I remember everybody's boundaries and everything. I don't know why. I'm like, oh yes, I worked with this actor and they're allergic to cats and they're allergic to seafood. And I'm talking about a specific actor right now that I won't say. But I just remember those things, and I think they also really appreciate that I remember those. And I think at the end of the day, it's also because I really care. Given like my background and everything, it's really important to me that the things that I'm doing on set and that I'm providing, they're gonna take away and like bring it, you know, to their real lives. They're gonna also be informed like, oh, if I can have boundaries on set, I should be able to have boundaries in real life. Like it just starts like making sense, I feel like. So it's kind of like, I feel like my little mark in the world. It's just like a little ripple effect. Yeah.
Sweet. Question?
Just kind of around boundary setting. Have you ever said no to a script because it was beyond your boundaries?
Yes.
Let's hear it.
I've had a few conversations with IC friends about this. Is like, what projects are we willing to take and what we're not willing to take? And there are certain ones where, I think, Allie, you just mentioned one. She's like, necrophilia. And I was like, no. So I think it's, yeah, we also get to have boundaries on what we're willing to work on and what we're not willing to work on. And then we'll just ask our IC friends like, hey, which one of you in this group chat wants to do this? Please take this job. Yeah.
Questions? Oh, no?
Yeah.
What are the requirements? Okay. So, what are the requirements to for people who want to get into it? What do you have to do to become a
Oh, yeah.
intimacy
This is
coordinator?
a great question. So I'm going back to the SAG guidelines. There is a PDF with all of the recommended like areas that you need to train in to be an intimacy coordinator. And it's very, very thorough. A lot of it at the beginning is consent-based work. There's also choreography, modesty garments, anti-racism work, which is amazing. So all of those areas you should be trained in, and that's when I say when you're hiring an IC, ask for a resume, ask what they're trained in, who did they train with, like what have they done in the past, have they worked on projects? Like I think it's really important to vet intimacy coordinators as well, because you're bringing someone on that's supposed to reduce harm and reduce risk. So I think it's really important that you make sure you're bringing the right person onto the set.
what should I tell my high school students who, like my seniors, who might not want to go to college right after high school, but they want to do something like that, like get the training, to eventually get to the goal of becoming an intimacy coordinator on
Yeah,
site?
I would recommend that they just start taking workshops. You don't have to like do a whole entire program. You can just take one-off workshops, take a couple intro workshops to intimacy coordinating, watch this live stream, and just kind of get an idea if it's something that you even want to do. And I think that's like the first step, right? Is to just see if this resonates with you or doesn't resonate with you, because it does take a specific type of person to do this job. You are in a lot of high stress situations sometimes. There's a lot of pressure, things are moving really fast, and you have to keep your cool. You have to be able to communicate well. You have to facilitate really difficult conversations sometimes. So having that type of skill set is also like really important for the job.
How do we find these workshops, or do you have specific resources that you can share?
Yeah, I mean, if anyone wants them, feel free to email me and I can send you some workshops. But you could Google. You can ask any of the ICs that are sitting. There's a few of my friends up here. So you could do all of that, or just take like a free online workshop on consent and see if that resonates and that's like something that you want to go out in the world and like make sure that situations are consensual. I think that's probably step number one. Yeah.
Do we have some more questions?
It's Q&A time.
Yeah, it's Q&A time.
How do you navigate when people don't understand consent on film sets? So what kind of ways do you deal with difficult conversations?
Could you be more specific?
So it could be maybe the director or even one of the scene partners. They're not respecting the other person's needs for consent and boundaries, and they're just kind of unaware. Like, how would you kind of navigate that?
I think a lot of it is like reiterating, like, hey, like we decided this is the choreography, let's stick to that. So having the language to make it a win for them. Like, I've had some actors sometimes that like don't want to do certain things, or like they're not comfortable with certain things, and I think a lot of times it's just having a conversation with them. It just could be that they're in their head about it. It really just depends on each individual situation. I think when it comes to directors, that could be a little bit difficult because sometimes directors want to like demonstrate on the actors, and so it's a lot of conversation happening also in pre-production so that you're setting it up for when we get to be on set and being like, hey, like, remember we talked about like, we're gonna give the actors some space. They're gonna be like doing all the choreography. Let's not demonstrate on them, like that sort of thing, so that you're kind of setting them up as a reminder instead of being like, don't do that. Like you don't wanna patronize anybody. And I think in general, also just expecting the best out of people. I like to think that people, when they can do the right thing, they will do the right thing. So I try to set them up in a way where like we're all successful, and no like shaming or anything like that. It's just like keeping it in a way that's positive. If it escalates too much, then I will go like talk to a producer and like be like, hey, this is what I'm observing. Like this is what's happening. And I personally can't do anything about it. I have a few options. I can leave the job. I can talk to the producers, let them know what's happening. If they decide whatever they decide, I could communicate that to other people. But that's kind of just about like my scope of work. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
There we go.
I had a question about the role of ICs with, say, genres like horror or thrillers. I'm thinking of a scene in Terminator 2 where the one of the, I can't remember his name, one of the guys that runs the ward that Sarah Connor's in, he licks her face after he like ties her down in the in the room. Like what's the role of the IC in that? Is that something where they're hired for the whole day just for that one part, or
What do you mean the whole day for the one part? Can you?
Like, yeah, I just mean like how, like I never even thought if they had an IC for that scene. Is that something that's, I mean, I feel like that's required today, but I just didn't know how they did it. Like, is that something, what's the role?
So I think it's like best practice, right? It's like production should do their best to provide whatever it is that the performers are needing for that scene. So maybe some performers are like, cool, I'll lick their face. And then the other one's like, cool, I'll get my face licked. And that's it, right? And then sometimes they're like, I think I would like an intimacy coordinator there for that. So things that we can provide are like mouthwash. We could also provide wet wipes, things that will be good for hygiene and safety around hygiene. We can also facilitate like what that action looks like, because you can lick someone's face in many different ways. So we can definitely inform on things like that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, following up on that question. So like, if it's just one scene, do you still get your full day rate for just like an hour or two of work? Or does your day rate change depending on the scope of work or the intensity?
I will say there's a minimum day rate. I don't work on half days, just like all other crew don't. So that's me personally. ICs at the moment, in a way, they get to decide their rate, but it's in line with stunts. So as stunt coordinators are coordinating and choreographing stunt sequences, we're doing the same thing in intimacy. And because I don't get to decide what time I come in or how long you're gonna use me, or if a scene that's supposed to take 30 minutes ends up taking 6 hours, because that's happened before. So usually it's on a day rate. And then prep rates are just dependent on each production. Sometimes they want us to bill hourly. Sometimes they rather bill weekly. Sometimes they want to bill like just however many days you think you might need to get the job done. And I decide that depending on what the intimacy is. What I was saying earlier, if it's just like a 3-second like kiss, that's not going to need as much prep as if we're working on like 3 non-consensual scenes in a day. The non-consensual scenes are going to take way longer to prep.
Do you have like some in your toolbox? Do you have like a place that you go to or things that you like to look at online or in books to get inspiration to help choreograph scenes when you get a script?
Sometimes directors send inspo to me. I have a really quick and funny story. So I was working on a project recently, a vertical, and then the director, when I got to set, was like, hey, I know we talked about all the choreography and all of this. I found a scene that I freaking love, and I would love to do a scene like this. I want the scene to be like this. She like plays it, and I'm like, why does this look familiar? And then in like 2 seconds, and I was like, I choreographed that. That was a really fun and cool moment. I think a lot of my inspiration I do just through research, like depending on what I'm working on, I will go on YouTube and try to find scenes and like see kind of like what other people have done. And I also really like when actors are super creative and they're like, I think I want to do it like this. And like directors also have ideas. So I always try to keep in mind it's a collaboration. Sometimes they need more choreography from me. Sometimes they need less. So it really just depends. And I'm cool with whoever is the person to do the majority of it. And I think being flexible is like really important in the role, because you don't want to go in and be like, I'm going to choreograph all of this. And like, I think a lot of our job is to just be helpful and supportive, like where we're needed. Yeah.
Do we have some more questions?
Can you tell us a little bit more about how you followed your path into IC?
Yeah, sure. So back when I was younger, like I was saying earlier, I did acting for a while, kind of realized it wasn't like my full passion. And then I started doing health and wellness stuff on social media. So I was an influencer before it was a thing. I have a YouTube plaque. That's for real. My husband will tell you that that's for real. So I had like all of this stuff that I was doing, but I wasn't quite finding the thing that I felt like would really make an impact. And I think that's really important for me, is like whatever I'm doing, I definitely want to leave people better than I found them, right? And I think sometimes with jobs, it's hard to do that. And I also, during that time, did a lot of like survivor advocacy stuff for years. And then during the pandemic, when we were all stuck at home, my sister's friend sent me like an article on Bridgerton, on Liz Talbot, and was like, hey, I think you should do this thing. It was on intimacy coordinators. And then I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then so I started taking a few online workshops because I was not doing anything. None of us were. We were just all at home, right? And then I was like, oh, wow, I have a lot of this training already. And I think a lot of it is also, because when you do go through some of these training programs, they don't really teach you a lot about television and film sets. And that's a whole beast in it of itself. Like, imagine like walking on a set and then you just see like 50 people and you're like, I have no idea what's a martini? First AD, what? Like, you know, what's a gaffer? Like, you know, so I think like that also really informed like my work, is just having all of those years like working on television sets too. And then I started pretty much like supplementing anything that I wasn't fully trained in already through the SAG guidelines. And then I started like working, and actually one of the first things I ever worked on, it went viral. And that's why there's so many verticals now. So I think I feel really grateful. I think it is really something that when I leave work most days where I'm like, that was awesome. One of my first projects that I ever worked on, the lead actress had never done intimacy before either. And it was really cool seeing how I didn't know how I was going to do at the job exactly. And then it was really cool being like, oh, actually I have all of these tools already from my past experience to help her figure out what her boundaries were. 'Cause she literally said to me, I don't know what my boundaries are. I don't know. And then at the end of the day, after we like finished all the intimacy scene, she came and gave me a hug and she's like, thank you so much. And I'm actually working with her again next week. I think we've worked together like 3 times now. So it's been really cool, like a lot of full circle moments for me, and I feel really grateful for it. And I freaking love my job. Yeah, so.
That's so awesome. It sounds like you found a very fulfilling career, and
Yeah.
you know, like that's cool that you helped her define her boundaries too. Like I think I was sharing with you that like even in acting classes, I feel like it would be so beneficial if we had an IC, like, you know, come and help us, because every acting class is different sometimes, and people's methods are different too.
Oh yeah,
you
like
know?
Meisner actors.
I was a Meisner actor.
Yeah, I've worked with Meisner actors. Like, no, just hit me with it. And I'm like, no, that's not safe. Yeah.
Yeah, but because I've been in situations where it was sketchy, and I wish, you know, there had been, we'd been taught, you know, like maybe, you know, verbiage or something, you know, ways to have the discussion.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think that's why I really, really like working with actors who are doing intimacy for the first time, is because I'm going to set that bar really freaking high, and then they're going to expect that on all of their next sets that they're going to work on. And like that's always like the goal for me, is like when I get to work with like young actors or just actors who've never done intimacy, I'm like, I'm gonna set that bar like through the roof. So you know that you can ask for all of these things. Yeah.
We love it. Keep setting that bar high. We're about at our time. So how can people connect with you, find you, if they want to learn more?
Oh, you can connect with me on Instagram. You can just come up and ask me what my Instagram is, but it's Love Health OK. It's from my wellness time. I haven't changed the handle. I don't know. okay, like a 2-year-old stole my name. So I like cannot, like I can't get it. So I'm just stuck with that. You can also email me. It's oliviaku.intimacy@gmail.com. So whichever way works best for you. Yeah. Yes. Oh yeah. Yes, it's OLIVIAKU and then .intimacy@gmail.com. Yeah. Thank you all for
Awesome.
coming.
Thank you, Olivia.
Yeah, thank you.
Yay, we did it.
All right, everyone. Thank you. Thank you for coming this month. We are moving on to the next portion of the meeting. It is asks and gives. So if you have a talent or you're out of work and you're looking for something to do and you want to offer your services to the group who may be looking for something, because I think one of our first meetings, someone said, I need a headshot photographer in San Jose. And someone's like, oh, I got one. So we want to build community this way, and we want to use, like link everyone up together and get what you need. So does anyone have an ask or a give? Ask can be like, I need a colorist. I just finished a short film. Can anyone help me or refer me to someone? As an example.
Hi, everyone. My name is Adele Chosen, newly married to this man over here. Yay! But I just wanted to offer to the intimacy coordinators, I'm a sound therapy practitioner, and I see the intersection between wellness and intimacy, and I'm really inspired and motivated. I just want to also bring wonderful, healthy offerings to the world, and I would love to work with anyone, like providing sound. I would donate or just work together, collaborate. So please connect with me, and I'm going to email you. But thank you.
Got a hand over here. Oh, by the way, as I'm walking over, we do have a Discord, and you're welcome to join our Discord.
Hi everyone, I'm Tina Kwok or TL Kwok, and I am a director and have like several very indie small passion projects. And we always like some helping hands, if anything. You could talk to me specifically which type of projects, one being music video, another is a little sort of vertical, but essentially it's a show that I created that's 2-minute short films about women walking home, and basically they're very tiny shoots to kind of like build a more awareness and conversations about safety and all that, and all the issues that arise when we're just women or just anyone who just walks home, and all that arise from that. So I'm perpetually shooting those type of projects is on a slow basis because it's I'm kind of self-starting it basically, and it's all volunteer based, and at this point until I have some sponsors and stuff, but I will I guess it's both ask and offer in a way, and hopefully it gives people experience or working on set or just having a good time. And I guess I'm also a working AD, so if anyone needs the service of managing film sets and stuff, can be that person depending on what the shoot is. But yeah. Thank you.
Hello, I'm YJ. I just got off a big job, so I have nothing to do. So I will work on whatever you need me to do. You don't have to pay me. Ask me. I do sound most of the time. I also produce and not really act, but yeah, whatever you need. I'll PA for you. Whatever you need. I've worked every department, so you tell me what you need, I'll do it.
I'm Victor. We come in a package, so if you get him, you get 2-for-1 deal, and that's pretty good. Oh, also, do want to state, if anyone here does a short film and we own the 8th members, making a short film or whatever, a music video, what have you, we will be more than happy to screen it here on the following meeting. We hope that we can eventually do like a monthly short film. That's the hope. But we got to do it. So start thinking of ideas. Because our goal is to have everyone just making stuff. You know, we can talk about making stuff. We can dream and you know, brainstorm all we want. But like